Good afternoon. This is Nina Stack, President of the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers, and I'm really pleased to have you joining us this afternoon. We are very happy to be offering our weekly Monday afternoon funder briefing conference calls. Our agenda today, I'm going to have a few brief remarks, and then we will hear from our guest speaker, Michael Passante, and perhaps some of his colleagues. We'll open things up for a Q&A after they speak, and then we'll have time for some general questions, comments. We also would love your feedback on the work that we've been doing, if there's something else that we could be doing to offer you assistance. Today's briefing begins the second round of this series of calls. The first began 1 week after Hurricane Sandy struck New Jersey, and our calls ran through March 25th. This second round, beginning today, will occur every Monday at 4 p.m. through November the 4th. However, we will not have a call on Columbus Day, the holiday, October 14th. The calls provide an opportunity for grant makers to hear from a wide range of experts, including national leaders in the field of disaster philanthropy, FEMA and HUD officials, New Jersey policymakers, local housing and mental health, nonprofit leaders, environmentalists, city and state planners, and a host of other stakeholders. That's what we've covered on our calls. I'm pleased that next week's call will focus on the long-term recovery groups. We're going to hear from a statewide perspective with Kathy McCann, as well as some of the chairs of the local groups, so that we can get the local perspective. The calls welcome all New Jersey grant makers, along with national funders who are interested. And they will allow, as I said, for a Q&A for speakers as time allows. And we really hope that this can build upon your collective and individual efforts. While the calls are intended only for the funding community, we can't guarantee that other individuals haven't dialed in. Some do pass on the dial-in number. So for each conference call, in the first series that we did, we recorded those, and the files are available on our website. We'll be doing the same. You may have just heard that this call is being recorded. And again, we will post that recording to our website for those who aren't able to join us today or perhaps want to go back over anything that was covered. Our post-Sandy work continues, and these calls represent one aspect of our ongoing efforts. In addition to posting the audio files of our briefings, we hope to transcribe what will then be all 25 calls into concise written summaries. These will increase access to the valuable information contained in each of the audio files. We're currently looking for some support to help us do that. We know that it can be shared and will go on to help live for others who, after disaster strikes, that they can learn from those. We're also very pleased to announce that we're going to be partnering with the Center for Disaster Philanthropy and the Forum of Regional Association of Grantmakers on the creation of a playbook of strategies that philanthropies have used nationwide post-disaster. We learned so much from our colleagues around the country in the weeks and months following Sandy about the issues that communities, and individuals face after disaster, and the innovative strategies that funders use to help in the recovery and rebuilding. We want to be sure to share all that learning, and there's so much more that we've learned since about how funders have responded. From a special Farmers Recovery Fund in Vermont that was established post-Hurricane Irene, to engaging the local law schools to assist victims after the Alabama tornadoes. We want to be able to build on those effective relief, recovery, and rebuilding strategies so that folks can continue to learn. The playbook is, I think, going to be a great tool to do that, and we're very excited to be partnering with the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. We also hope to work with the Foundation Center to produce a scan of how the philanthropic sector responded to Hurricane Sandy and the specific New Jersey nonprofits, the key nonprofits that they funded. We've learned from past disasters that having that kind of data on nonprofits that are being supported really provides a invaluable roadmap of sorts for national funders who are looking to contribute, looking to work with local nonprofits on the ground. We heard this a lot from folks as part of the key learning from Hurricane Katrina that our colleagues at Philanthropy New York had published a similar kind of scan report. So we are hoping to do that as well. I want to remind you that we have a dedicated Hurricane Sandy area on our website, which you can go to at cnjg.org/Sandy Response. And we continue to manage the Sandy listserv, which is available to any funder to get on that listserv. If you have any questions about our work and would like to be added to that listserv, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, or I'm thrilled to say that Elizabeth Murphy is back with us and helping. And you can reach Elizabeth at her email, which is her name, Elizabeth Murphy, at cnjg.org. She is managing all of our post-Sandy related work. So I am really happy now to introduce our guest speaker, and I'm going to ask Michael if you would press *7, and along with any of your colleagues who are with us, that will unmute the line for you. Michael Passante is with us today. Michael is the New Jersey State Director for the President's Hurricane Sandy Federal Rebuilding Task Force. He's going to speak with us about the report that was issued on August 13th, specifically about what the report means for New Jersey and how the recommendations contained within relate to philanthropy. I want to tell you a little bit about Michael's background because he's a Jersey guy, which is great. He has been, obviously, he's with the Rebuilding Task Force and has been there since February, but he's also legislative counsel to the U.S. Senate Housing Subcommittee. And he was I believe he was a municipal prosecutor for the city of Newark several years ago. So among his career highlights. So Michael, I'm hoping that you're with us.
Yep, I am. Thank you, Nina. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Nina, and thank you, Elizabeth, for your great job in pulling this together. I'm glad to see that there's so much interest in Hurricane Sandy recovery, given that it's really hit New Jersey and New York so hard. So I wanted to, and I also wanted to congratulate you on taking lessons from other parts of the country and the world. I'm actually at a conference in New York right now where we're learning from the Dutch about the methods that they use for flood control protection and vice versa. And we've benefited from so many people coming from the Gulf Coast to teach us lessons about disaster here in New Jersey. So what I wanted to do was give you an overview of the task force, why it was created, what it does, and then review the strategy itself, at least the highlights of it. For those of you not familiar with it, it has 69 recommendations for how the federal government can improve its response to Sandy. And I won't go through all of those, but I wanted to highlight maybe half a dozen of them that are especially relevant to the funding community. President Obama created this task force. It is a federal task force because of the scope and the regional nature of Hurricane Sandy. And the main goal was to create a report or a strategy for long-term rebuilding for the region, particularly New Jersey and New York. And the report that we created is probably the most significant review the federal government has ever done after a natural disaster on how to rebuild. So as I mentioned before, it has 69 recommendations on how to improve federal programs to better meet people's needs on the ground, to cut red tape, and to set principles or guidelines for how the federal government should invest taxpayer dollars. So the real goals are getting families back in their homes, small businesses back on their feet, and communities rebuilding their infrastructure. And all of these recommendations have federal agencies with plans to implement them. And those are typically FEMA or HUD or maybe the Army Corps of Engineers, you name it. And there's a plan for holding them accountable at the White House level for implementing those recommendations. For those of you who, I understand that the strategy has already been circulated to most, if not all of you, but if you need a copy, you can find it at www.hud.gov. That's Department of Housing and Urban Development.gov. The HUD Secretary, Sean Donovan, is the chair of the task force, and I'm the New Jersey State Director of an office of about 10 people we had here in New Jersey. We're experts in all sorts of policy areas working out of the FEMA office in Lincroft, New Jersey. So in terms of the central message of the strategy, the central message is that we need to rebuild stronger so that we can withstand future disasters, and that includes preparing for the effects of climate change and sea level rise. So the report strongly supports taking steps to protect our communities by doing things like elevating homes, building dunes. We saw during Sandy that homes and communities are less likely to be destroyed when we take those measures. Literally, you can see homes that were elevated right next to houses that were destroyed because they weren't elevated, and the same thing with dunes and entire communities. And one study showed that for every dollar we spend on mitigation or strengthening our buildings, saves us $4 in avoided costs in the future. So we should be taking smart steps like that. Now, in the meantime, one other development in New Jersey you should be aware of too is that the state has implemented the first round of community development block grant funding, which is the largest chunk of long-term rebuilding money coming into the state. There will be future rounds of that coming as well, and that has been used for a variety of programs on largely on homeowners, renters, and small businesses. And some of those deadlines have already passed for those programs, but some are still coming up in September or later dates. So a few of the highlights of the different areas that the strategy touches on, I'll go through here. One is, so the first I would say is infrastructure. And there the goal is really to ensure a regionally coordinated and resilient approach to infrastructure. So it has things like making the electrical grid smarter and more flexible, protecting the liquid fuel supply chain to better prepare for future storms, to avoid all those long gas lines that everybody had to wait on with the fuel shortages. It's developing a resilient power strategy for telephone and internet communication systems and equipment. And we also provided a forum to coordinate large-scale regional infrastructure projects. So this is a forum where state, federal, and local governments are all getting together to discuss those projects and the connections and interdependencies between them to save money and get better results at all levels. And in the infrastructure area, perhaps the biggest development is that we established guidelines that all federal agencies that do infrastructure investments have agreed to ensure that projects are meet certain criteria that are getting federal investments. So that includes things like making sure that those investments are resilient to future storms, making sure there's public transparency so the public knows what's going on, and examining all possible alternatives to those projects, including, say, green alternatives like green infrastructure. And then second area is housing, and that is we are providing families safe, affordable housing options and protecting homeowners and renters by allowing homeowners to make emergency repairs more quickly, preventing responsible homeowners from being forced out of their homes due to short-term financial hardship while they're recovering from disaster. And we're doing that by creating nationally consistent mortgage policies across Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA, and making housing units, both individual and multifamily, more sustainable and resilient through smart recovery steps like elevating above the flood risk level. We made that a standard in the entire Sandy region of ABSE +1, that all homes using federal investments have to be rebuilt to that standard. And then also communicating to state and local governments, residents, and workers consistent guidance on mold and other indoor environmental pollutants that have been a problem. Third area is small business and revitalizing local economies. And there's a variety of solutions we've been working on, largely with the Small Business Administration. And that is making it easier for small businesses to access federal contracts for Hurricane Sandy rebuilding, creating specialized skills training programs in those areas that are most needed for Sandy rebuilding, especially for low-income individuals or vulnerable populations, and developing a one-stop shop online for everything related to small businesses and recovery, so no matter which website people go to, they can find the information that they need. And then also increasing the SBA's unsecured disaster loan limits and expediting the disbursement of those small dollar loans, so to hold small businesses over better in the event of a disaster. Then a fourth area I would mention is insurance. I mean, obviously, flood insurance has been a huge issue in the region, and we are encouraging homeowners and other policyholders to take steps to mitigate future risks, such as elevating their homes and businesses, which protects against the next storm, but also makes the flood insurance premiums more affordable under the National Flood Insurance Program. We've also taken steps to streamline payouts to homeowners in the future in the wake of a disaster. And then finally, we're recommending continuing with the study there that was required by the Bigger Waters Act on affordability of those flood insurance premiums. And that is going to take some time to complete, but that is something that we think needs further study to figure out how to balance that, the issues of the affordability of premiums and kind of changing the character of the shore as to who can afford to live there versus making sure that the National Flood Insurance Program remains solvent, since it has a pretty significant deficit right now. Then another area I would mention is promoting resilient rebuilding based on current and future flood risk through innovative ideas. So that involves things like giving the governments and residents the best available data we have on flood risks. So we made available, for example, a sea level rise planning tool that will, where people can actually go on there, whether they're planners or residents, and actually see what is projected to happen over the course of the next 100 years in terms of sea level rise. We've also established a very neat competition called Rebuild by Design that is going to get together some of the best minds in the world in engineering and architecture and to deliver innovative, resilient rebuilding ideas to the region. So they are actually competing to develop such ideas, whether it's protecting an individual home from floods to ideas that could protect all of New York Harbor. That competition is actually going on right now, and there's community engagement around it to make sure that things that they're working on actually will meet needs on the ground. And then finally, I will mention building local government capacity for long-term rebuilding to prepare for future disasters. And that's a big issue that we've heard about on the ground in New Jersey, is just making sure that local governments think of, a small shore town with a part-time mayor and a few part-time municipal employees. Disaster is really a full-time business, the recovery phase. So we are recommending there supporting some of the regional planning efforts that are underway in New York and New Jersey to implement a locally created but hopefully federally funded strategies for rebuilding and strengthening their communities against future extreme weather. And that involves things like funding local disaster recovery manager positions that are needed in communities in the region that can help towns to work through those recovery issues, connect them to resources. In that realm, one idea probably the idea that the New Jersey team of the task force has spent the most time on has been this model that we've worked on called local resilience partnerships, which are, as those of you familiar with New Jersey know that one of the big issues here is home rule and how to get towns that are very small often and very independent to cooperate with one another across regional issues when they face common risks, especially common flood risks. So these local resilience partnerships are voluntary associations of municipalities that we are trying to pull together and fund to be able to help communities recover in that kind of mini regional sense, if you will. And there's a whole model that we've worked out with New Jersey Future, Sustainable Jersey, and some funders, including the Recovery Fund in New Jersey and the Dodge Foundation. And the Robert Wood Johnson Fund has contributed to some impact assessments there as well. So I'm happy to talk about that further if folks have questions on that. So that's the overview of the strategy. The few recommendations I would specifically point out to you that mention kind of either nonprofit or funder community involvement, I would say that those are, for those of you who want to look them up afterward, are recommendations 15, 32.
Can you, Michael, can you just say what that relates to?
Yep. Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Because the highlights aren't by number.
Oh, yeah. No. Absolutely. I just wanted to list them first so everybody knew.
Okay.
44, 59, 61, and 68 would be the ones I would recommend reading. And I'll go through those quickly. Number 15 is mobilizing the private sector and the nonprofit community to develop innovative solutions that support and integrate whole community efforts for disaster relief. And part of the idea there was that the White House was going to have a brainstorming session together with nonprofits and the private sector to develop those kinds of innovative solutions and to talk about what might be possible there. Number 32 is identifying opportunities for state and local housing programs to leverage funds and create public-private partnerships. Part of what the task force has done there is we've, for the first time ever, we've created a comprehensive CDFI list and a listing of what sorts of things that they're engaged in the recovery field, and that was done as a combination of the Opportunity Finance Network and the HUD Office of Philanthropy worked on that jointly. Then number 44 is encouraging the CDBG grantees and private sources to fund additional CDFI outreach and support to small businesses in vulnerable communities. And the idea there is that a lot of CDFIs, have connections to small businesses that otherwise might not hear about the assistance that's available out there, and to try to figure out better ways to do outreach there. Numbers 59 and 61 are about capacity building. Number 59 is the supporting the pilots for New Jersey local resilience partnerships that I mentioned and other New Jersey planning efforts. because we need a lot more planning in New Jersey going forward to make sure that recovery dollars are spent wisely. And we've been engaging with nonprofit and philanthropic partners in that. Number 61 is facilitating and expanding opportunities for philanthropic and nonprofit engagement in recovery, including opportunities for organizations that work with vulnerable populations. And that is something that FEMA in both New York and New Jersey is going to be actively coordinating support for funder collaboratives that provide grants to nonprofits working in coordination with government. And the idea there is to get the community more involved in not just the response phase right after a disaster, but also in the recovery phase, which is a bit longer term, and often where help is needed after attention is shifted away from the disaster. And then number 68 is continuing the functions of the Project Management Office of the task force to track the progress of Sandy supplemental funding. The task force set up a Project Management Office that has created a publicly available information tracking what's happening with various pots of Sandy spending going out of the $50 billion appropriated by Congress, and that function will continue after the task force winds down its work at the end of this month and hands over all that work to other federal agencies, including a post-task force Sandy tracking office, as we're calling it. So those are some recommendations I would specifically point out to you. And I welcome any questions that you might have for me or for anyone else on my team. I'm not. Diane and Ben, are you on the line as well?
They should press *7. Oh, good. You know to
Great.
press *7 to unmute.
Great. Diane Kinane, for those of you who don't know her, is the Deputy State Director in New Jersey and was formerly headed up the CDBG program for the state of New Jersey. And Ben Spinelli is a senior policy advisor for the task force, and he previously headed the Office of Long-Term Office of Planning in the state. So.
Great. Well, thank you. It's a lot of information, and we, I believe, have links available on our website, and we've sent that out, and as you said, it's all available. What I'd like to ask is for anyone who has any questions or comments for Michael or Ben or Diane.
Yes, Diane.
Is that right? Yes, Diane. You can press *7 to unmute your line. Well, I'll take a moment while people can think about what they might want to ask. And just, I think, Michael, you've been on these calls in the past, but Ben and Diane, I'll let you know that we have quiet folks. So I
think I just deluged them with a whole lot of information, so maybe they need a few minutes to think about it. I don't know.
Could you talk a little bit more, because I hadn't could you offer sort of a scenario on recommendation 61 related to the capacity building and the idea obviously of the funder collaboratives, but could you expand a little bit more about what you see the work that a funder collaborative would support?
Right. It's hard to say anything very specific because the role of the task force wasn't to identify individual projects in the state or specific things to fund. But I can connect folks with other federal offices, including FEMA, that have a handle on sort of what specific needs might be out there if anybody has any particular interest. But the idea in general was to get those collaboratives more involved in the recovery phase.
I see. Okay. So the recommendation is related to, is about getting funder collaboratives going.
Right,
okay.
And supporting them, that's right.
Okay.
And that also includes, I should mention, encouragement of state and local governments that are getting CDBG money, which nonprofits cannot get that directly. It goes to state and local governments, and we encourage in their subgrants of such funds to NGOs that would assist in accomplishing federal outreach requirements, especially to vulnerable populations who might not otherwise hear about assistance that's available in the recovery phase.
Okay. I do want to mention we are also planning on having Pete Kasabak on one of these calls, who's New Jersey Future, and he can go into more depth.
And we've been working with him closely on these issues.
We also are our funders for Strong and Thriving Communities are going to be meeting on October 2nd in Asbury Park, and that program and that work is a big part of what the agenda will be for that meeting as well on that end. I guess the other I wanted to ask you to expand, if you could, a little bit on number 15, mobilizing to support whole community efforts for innovative. Is there a sense of that, or are there any examples that you could share to help people sort of visualize what's intended there?
That's a good question. Diane and Ben, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. This is the recommendation about mobilizing the private sector and nonprofit community to develop innovative solutions that support and integrate whole community efforts for disaster relief. I certainly have seen lots of examples of organizations that are rebuilding homes for people in New Jersey. I know Diane has been working on something with a few different for-profit and nonprofits on developing resilient standards for specific homes as sort of a model. And there are other good examples. No specific ones are coming to my mind right now besides that. But
okay. I'm going to ask the hard question, which I think I know the answer to. The word recommendations has been very specifically chosen because many of these are not necessarily the state has to agree to implement a lot of these. Is that correct? It's not a given that they must implement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So it's actually a mixture. Some of these recommendations are things that require no state and local involvement. They're just changes that the federal government either has already made or will agree to, or are agreeing to make and are currently implementing. And there are some recommendations that are recommendations for future study, like, for example, on what to do about affordability of the flood insurance premiums. That would be one example of that. Or whether to apply the infrastructure resilience guidelines nationally and not just in the Sandy-affected region. That's another issue for looking into further. And there are some recommendations, as you point out, Nina, that are more like encouraging states and localities to do something, and that does require action on the part of states or localities. For those, often what it involves is the federal government recommending it and then trying to support that. However, the federal government can support that when state and local governments try to do that, so it's a bit of an incentive effect there. And I would also say that in some cases the federal government can require certain actions through their programs that they put out. So, for example, I mean, HUD has the CDBG block grants that it has a notice for, and the requirements in that notice can affect exactly, what state and local governments have to do to use that money. So there are sometimes, it's a complicated relationship where there are sometimes strings attached to that federal money coming in.
One of the things that we had sort of talked about, are there ways for the philanthropic community or the nonprofit community to advocate that you're seeing or that you would recommend? Ben, you and I had talked a little bit about this before, of if there are sort of critical points of the process where it would be helpful to have strong advocates and who they need to advocate with. Any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear your question, Nina.
The idea that in order for some of these recommendations that the state doesn't necessarily have to pursue, as they're determining whether or not they will, are there specific places or ways in which you're seeing that it makes sense for nonprofits or communities to be advocates?
Right. I wouldn't feel comfortable sort of answering exactly where folks should be advocates with state or local governments or with any other entities, because it's not really the task force role to kind of encourage that specifically. But obviously, if nonprofits or funders or other advocacy groups want to advocate certain outcomes, based on the recommendations in the task force's report, they're obviously free to do that. And you can sort of read through those recommendations and sort of see where the gaps might be. And on each of those recommendations, I would point out that it does list for each of them which federal agency is responsible for it and to what extent involves state or local cooperation being necessary. So,
great, and probably the agencies there, the state or local that would be involved. So I'll ask again if there are any other questions. *7 to unmute your line.
Hi, this is Lucy Vandenberg. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Lucy. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks, with the Fund for New Jersey. I was just wondering what the next steps were in terms of implementation of these recommendations from a coordinated viewpoint. Like, is there going to be a body of federal and state folks that are going to work together to look at how to put things together, and is there a role for the philanthropic community in that? And is the task force sort of done now, or how's that all going to work?
So each of the recommendations has federal agencies that are responsible for implementing them, and for those recommendations that involve the philanthropic community in some way, there are.
I'm sorry, Michael, you're breaking up.
Those going forward, a lot of those haven't been fully developed and are in. That's the plan.
Michael, I'm sorry, your line is breaking up. We're getting about every third word. And maybe now we've lost.
Oh.
Michael, are you there? Lucy, you're still there, right?
Yeah. I'm still here.
Okay. I know Michael said he was in New York, so he was probably talking on a cell. Hopefully he will be able to get back in and join us. Ben, I don't know, Ben or Diane, is there anything you might be able to add?
Following up what where Michael was heading, Lucy, as there are succession plans in place, and there will be a team remaining at HUD who are going to be responsible for tracking the progress of the recommendations. The one thing that, and I don't know if Michael has already mentioned it, that was really critical for this strategy was that it was going to be implemented and that it was not going to be a report that just sat on a shelf. So things have been put in place, as I said, to track progress. I believe that there will be a role for nonprofits in some of the recommendations that are going to involve evaluation of either existing programs or some existing policies. I know in the housing policy section, that most certainly was taken into consideration.
And it's Michael. Can everyone hear me again?
Yes, now you're back. Great.
Yeah, sorry, my phone suddenly cut out for an unknown reason. So if that happens again, obviously we have Diane and Ben on the line. So.
Lucy, did that answer?
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Great.
And then if other people don't have questions, I was curious about the data implementation too, because that seems really important to be able to have that transparency and to see where the money's going over time. So just understanding a little bit better how that's going to work would be great.
Yeah, basically there is a website with each of the federal pots of money listed. So whether it's the CDBG money from HUD, Department of Transportation money, Army Corps of Engineers, you name it, and kind of a listing of how much has been actually spent each month, how much has been obligated, what stages that the money is at. And that is publicly available and will continue to be. In terms of there's a whole section of the strategy that deals with data sharing beyond just those kind of basic numbers, but that also sets forth better ways that nonprofits in future disasters, that the nonprofit and philanthropic communities, as well as the general public and state and local governments, can get better data on what is going on and what the needs are. So that section includes recommendations like developing a uniform process among HUD and FEMA and the SBA for requesting data from those agencies for state and local governments, improving their sharing that data and deciding in advance, setting up those procedures in advance so that happens more quickly going forward, since that was a problem in Hurricane Sandy.
Thank you. And is that broken out for New Jersey specifically, the data that's already available?
I believe it's broken out at the state level, from my understanding. I do not believe that it's broken out on the local level, because I have gotten some requests to that effect, and I know that was not available on the kind of town-by-town local level, but on the state level it is, yes.
Thanks.
I had two questions. Folks emailed in to me. What is the best way to engage with FEMA in light of the fact that the presence in New Jersey is decreasing rapidly? And also, Michael, how long will you be serving in your position as director of the New Jersey director of the Federal Task Force?
Sure. Well, in terms of, let me take the latter first. The task force is here till September 30th, so I'm only here for, along with Ben and Diane and others on the task force, for another 3 weeks or so, September 30th. As for engaging with FEMA, the Joint Field Office in FEMA will be here in Lincroft, New Jersey, at least through the fall, and you are correct that they are beginning to have already begun to demobilize. That is, the number of federal personnel has been shrinking as the recovery has progressed. But those efforts will be taken over for FEMA by FEMA Region 2 office, which is kind of the regional office for the area that includes New Jersey, and that's located in New York City. And there are contacts there that we're happy to share with you going forward. So,
please do. That would be great.
Okay, we'll do that, and you could circulate that to everybody later,
Yep,
Nina?
Exactly. Yep.
Great.
Yep, absolutely. I think also we have sent folks, if you could resend me the link to the website that has the breakdown on the money, we've sent that out once already to folks, but I think right after it went live. So periodically we could send that out to people.
Yep. We'll do that.
Other questions? Press *7 to unmute your line.
Hi, this is Kiki Jameson from the Fund for New Jersey.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi. I had a follow-up question on the data.
Uh-oh. Kiki, I think we lost you. Michael, are you still with us?
I'm still with you. I think you lost Kiki this time.
Yep. I wonder what happened. I'll send her a quick.
Hi,
are you
Nina?
back? There you are. Yes, you're back.
Am I here? Okay.
Yes.
So, did you hear any of my questions?
No, we didn't.
Oh,
Just said
sorry
you had a
about
follow-up
that.
question.
My question is about the data and sharing of data for Recommendation 68. So, a lot of us are interested in transparency. And I'm wondering if the expectation of data being published on October 1st is still on track, and if so, how granular that information might be.
Yeah, and that gets to the, we're happy to send around the website afterwards so you can actually see how granular the data is. As I was saying before, it's largely on the state level, but doesn't get down to kind of county or local levels. In terms of, was there anything else specific that you wanted to know about it?
Right. I was wondering if come October 1st there will be a new level of information that is published. Right. Can we expect significantly more information at that point, or are we seeing just a rollout of the existing categories and structures?
You know, that's a good question. My understanding is that they actually finished a bit early and published the website ahead of October 1st. But I can check with our project management office as to whether they plan on publishing a higher level of detail starting October 1st. I'm not sure the answer to that off the top of my head, but Ben or Diane, if either of you know, do chime in. Otherwise, I can check with our project management office and get back to you.
Thanks. That would be really helpful.
Other questions? Press star 7 to unmute your line.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is Amelia DeLeo with the New Jersey Recovery Fund.
Hi.
Hi. I had a question. I recently saw a talk by Mr. Foley from FEMA, and he explained that this process of hazard mitigation planning is going on, and there's also the long-term recovery planning. And I was just wondering if either of those processes are kind of being informed in any way by the task force report.
Yes, it's a good question. Well, let me put it this way: the hazard mitigation planning, for example, a lot of the recovery that's going on in New Jersey is funded by federal dollars. So, to the extent that the task force's recommendations affect the strings that are put on those federal dollars, yes, those processes will be affected by the task force strategy. FEMA is one of the FEMA provides those like hazard mitigation grants, for example, and they are one of the federal agencies that has agreed to apply the infrastructure guidelines that I spoke about earlier. Those would be required going forward as part of those kinds of programs. The strategy is going to affect a large part of the rebuilding taking place in New Jersey.
That's great. Glad to hear it. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? So I've had one that gets back into that sort of the state government question, and Michael, I realize you may not be able to ask this, but it's come in based on from your perch of the past year, but then also from your own experience prior to the task force. Thoughts on how New Jersey's philanthropic sector can work most effectively with our state government. We have strong relationships with very effective nonprofits, but we want to help to bridge those gaps between the government and the nonprofit sector. Any thoughts, suggestions?
That's a good question. I would say, the person I've worked with in the state most closely on that is Meredith Ruggles in the Governor's Office of Recovery and Rebuilding. So I would recommend getting in touch with her about kind of what gaps there might be in the recovery from the state's perspective, at least, in trying to work on those kinds of issues. I mean, obviously there are also, state agencies. If foundations are nonprofits have specific areas of interest, obviously there are state agencies that are involved in those particular areas, such as, DCA for housing or, DEP for environmental issues, so on and so forth. In terms of one other office you might want to be in touch with, and I know this isn't a state, but on the federal level, I mean, HUD has an Office of Philanthropy that is trying to engage folks in recovery as well, so they might be worth getting in touch with.
Right. We had heard from Stuart Sarkozy-Benkosi when he was there, but I didn't know who's stepped in once he left. Yeah,
and there's been a variety of folks there since then. I don't believe they've chosen a permanent head of that office, but I'm happy to put you in touch with other folks there, including Justin Scheid from there.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Michael or on the federal role and federal work? So we've got some follow-up that we'll be sending out. *7 to unmute if you did have a question. And I'll ask you just to jump in then if you do. But so we've talked about a lot of different things, and we're going to we will forward. Michael will get information to us, and we'll forward that back out to folks on the listserv. Thank you so much, Michael, for taking the time, and Benjamin and Diane for being with us. We really appreciate it, and all of the outreach and communication that we've had with you. So thank you. Here are applause. We're applauding you for your help in taking the time.
We applaud you, Nina, for the great job you're doing in pulling everybody together and getting information out there. So we appreciate it.
Happy to do that. So on that note of we would welcome any feedback from those of you that are on the listserv and even those who may not be, on what we could be doing, what maybe we shouldn't be doing, how we could do things differently or better in terms of the information that we're providing. If you don't, I would love to hear it now, or just feel free to send us an email. Because we put a lot of information out, we don't necessarily hear back from people. So it would be great to know if what we're doing is working for you, or if there's something else we could be doing that would make it a little easier, a little better. With the articles, now that we'll be sending reminders out about the phone calls and announcements of the phone calls, we'll be attaching articles to those announcements rather than sending out individual emails with articles of interest to everybody. I also will just remind folks that so next week's call will be focused on the long-term recovery groups, and we'll hear from Kathy McCann from the statewide perspective and some of the local folks who are chairing the long-term recovery groups. We also have some other programs coming up that I just wanted to mention that might be of interest. This week is our conversation with the Cabinet with Commissioner Blake of New Jersey's Department of Children and Families, which you are more than welcome to join. Funders are more than welcome to join us for that, discussing the current priority areas, and I'm sure Sandy is definitely on their docket as well, and the possible opportunities for the philanthropic community to partner with the state and to understand what the state's priorities are, obviously, is the big deal. And also for them to hear from you about what philanthropy's priorities and the folks that you work with. We often find in these programs, the commissioners really value being able to hear about work and organizations, your grantees, that they may not know about. And then we also have our funders briefing later in the month on the implementing the Affordable Care Act and the health care exchanges. In the meantime, we also have our health and aging group has got their affinity group meeting happening on the 17th, as well as an early childhood education group that's meeting on the early morning of the 17th as well, and more programs that will be rolling out on that. Again, I'll just give you Elizabeth's email if you want to be added to the listserv or any comments or anything. It is her name, Elizabeth with a Z, Murphy, at cnjg.org. And anybody have any comments, any news that folks should hear about or know? You can press *7 to unmute your line. No? Okay, then. We will say again thank you to Michael and Ben and Diane for joining us. I want to thank Elizabeth Murphy for coming back on board and helping us to produce these calls, and wish you all a very good day, and don't hesitate to be in touch, and we'll talk again next week. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand by.